What's up, everybody? My name's Indy, and Jay is out of convention right now, so it's just me. And welcome to Indie Game Business. We've got Ben Kvalo, CEO, founder of Midwest Games, and Ben was on the show. You were on the show. I don't know how many months ago it was. Someone in the chat, if you remember how long ago it was.
I know it was last year ago. Yeah, right.
Year ago. Yeah, so to start off, I'll do what Jay always does. Tell us how you got into the game industry.
Well, just the traditional path of trying to go into something else, I ended up in radio for a while, and then was fortunate enough I built kind of an operations resume. I was fortunate enough to get a job as an operations coordinator at 2K in kind of the early days of 2K, and so. Interviewed for that. I was living in Wisconsin at the time, and they're like, okay, but you got to move out to San Francisco within 2 weeks to start this job if you want to take it. And so I moved my life, out to San Francisco. Had never been before at that point in my life, and completely reset everything to go into the games industry. And it was just very fortunate. I was the only operations person below the executive level in the company, and was able to do just a ton of things that gave me so much exposure to many levels within this industry, and I got to learn a lot there.
Right on. I've got another question real quick. So I was looking at the images behind you on the wall. There's R2-D2 and C-3PO and Luke Skywalker. I was like, first from a distance, I was like, oh, that looks like level design. Right from top down, like design level. So, is that your artwork? Is that just something?
No. I just try to collect. I got The Witcher behind me as well. We got the Harry Potter at a door over here.
Right.
Yeah. No. I just stuff I've collected throughout the years. That I don't know where I found the R2-D2 and C-3PO. It was many years ago at this point.
You're like, this is weird. Nobody has this. Let's get one of these.
Yeah, I mean, it's unique, right? And I always try to find some things that are unique. What you can't see is like this entire wall is like filled with different pieces of artwork, and all the nerdum that my wife and I collect. She began her career in kind of entertainment, publicity. And actually worked at DC Comics and was Batman's publicist, like comic book Batman, for a while. Wow. So we have a lot of cool stuff, especially from the comic realm, different signed things. She's drawn as Superwoman and signed by Jim Lee, which is super cool.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, I've got some questions over here. Midwest Games. So you were on about a year ago. Can you tell us a little bit about what has happened with Midwest Games and maybe a little hint of what's to come?
Yes. So the last year has been just wild. I mean, the year one, and this is like full year one, I left Netflix in May of 2023. We got funding by September of 2023, and then we signed a number of titles. So really 2024 was our first year of operating a business, being able to really work on games, release games. And so we started out the year releasing The Lullaby of Life, ended up bringing that to not only PC, but to Xbox and Nintendo Switch as well. So going through the process of onboarding those platforms, and then later in the year we had 3 games in 30 days that we released with Hive Jump 2 Survivors, Paradox, and then Dark Sky. And so we ramped up our team to kind of handle all of that, and saw the challenges in the current landscape. I remember starting last year and saying, I think there's going to be an increase in games, but I didn't think it was going to be dramatic. And what ended up happening was a dramatic increase in games. We went from 14.5 thousand games to 19,000 games, the largest jump I think we've ever seen. And the volume of titles has created such a challenging go-to-market path that it made our life extremely challenging. How do we stand out? How do we, cut through the noise and really work and support these developers? And it was definitely like a roller coaster of emotions. But being able to release a game, getting it out, we've been able to get some partner deals with Amazon and others with these titles. Has been just incredible seeing titles, everything from we took a student project that was a game jam project and helped to bring it to life with Duck Paradox, to, studios like Ganymede Games that put out Dark Sky. That's their first project as a studio. They, are built in New Mexico, not necessarily a place that you expect game development studios to be, but they're building in a different place. And so to be able to help them get their first project out, try to elevate it in the largest way has been just exhilarating. But there's so many challenges doing a startup. Like the reality is most startups fail. Most startups don't even make it this long. We're over a year and a half in, coming up on 2 years. And so to be just alive still and continue to move forward and continuing to try to see, like, how do we make change? How do we make positive change in the industry? And that, to your alluding, like, that's where we're right now in the midst of, we see some unique opportunities emerging. With traditional publishing models, they're all based on rev share on the back end and IP rights, and trying to get a piece of that, which is, if a game hits, is a huge windfall for everybody involved with the title. But then the developer ends up getting, 1/3 or less of their revenue at the end of the day. And I think there's other models that can exist. I think if we look at other entertainment areas, and how they finance games, how they put out games, how they de-risk some of the investments in games, I think there's actually a lot of other ways to support and publish games that haven't yet been explored. And that's a big piece of what we're looking to do next. In fact, we have a big announcement coming up next week that will talk a little bit about how we're looking to create one of the solutions to what I see as a problem in the market, and how we evolve the industry forward.
Oh, that's exciting to hear. I'm excited to hear that announcement. I don't even know that announcement, you guys. So I'm excited to hear it, because developers need help. And so the traditional way is, XYZ, and throw something in there, that's how you evoke change, is by trying something new and different. So what was there a specific moment that you decided, I'm going to start Midwest Games? Like, what was that like? What made you decide to do that exactly?
Yeah, at the time I was at Netflix. So I helped to lead the launch of the product for Netflix Games. I had been at Netflix before that on the film side. I've jumped around in my career from 2K to Blizzard. So 2K was AAA publishing, to Blizzard, which I was helping to build the cross-functional esports end of things, to Films end. I was the first hire on the marketing operations team. And then I was at Netflix on the games end. I came over to help launch the product, to build out the launch operations. And so we had everything kind of built on that end. And I'm a builder. I like a challenge. I don't like just you're going to do this every day. Like some people enjoy that kind of work, and it's just not for me. And so I was thinking about, well, what are the things that I could do in games based off of my skill set that I've learned throughout my career, and how could I create impact maybe in a more micro way, in some place that's a little bit different. And I look back to where I came from, and the fact that I couldn't get a job in the games industry in Wisconsin when I was coming out of school. There was no opportunities. And I look back, and what I saw was a giant opportunity in Wisconsin and the Midwest, with a growing ecosystem in Madison, Wisconsin. A lot of people don't realize that Madison has developers that lead or work on Call of Duty, Apex Legends, PUBG, Elder Scrolls Online, Diablo 4, WWE 2K, Disney Heroes. Like there's an incredible wealth of game development studios that work on some of the largest games in the industry right in Madison, Wisconsin. And so I saw that, but then I saw, well, wait, there's a gap. There is no support functions. What if somebody that's working in Call of Duty wants to go off and create their own studio and create their own game? They don't have the luxury of any kind of strong funding sources because investors in that region mainly invest in very traditional industries: healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture.
Corn.
Corn, cheese, beer.
Cheese and beer.
Yeah, it's very, very traditional. And so I was like, and then there's no publisher. And you look around the world, and no region around the world has been able to consistently succeed without a strong publisher in a region, because it's a way to support a volume of projects at a time, and some of those work out and blow up into something larger. And so the moment that I really realized was I was back in Green Bay. I was actually going to a Packers game I went to UW Green Bay for college. I'm on the alumni board, so they were bringing me to a Packers game. And I met with a venture capital firm called Titletown Tech in Green Bay. And I had done a couple talks with them talking about Netflix culture with their startups. And I just simply brought their head and I said, hey, could we get like 30 minutes? I have this idea. And so I presented what would eventually become Midwest Games, of like, hey, what if we invested in this region more in games? We supported games worldwide, but we did it out of like Green Bay, Wisconsin. And they just loved it. And luckily, Titletown Tech is a firm that was put together by the Packers and Microsoft. And Microsoft's president, Brad Smith, is actually from Appleton, Wisconsin, which is just down the road from Green Bay. And so that became a unique opportunity where we could ultimately, we got investment, they're our lead investor. And we have that backing, we have that connection to Microsoft. And it allowed us that kind of pathway. But before that, I didn't know if that was a reality. Like I had the spark of an idea, but I didn't have anybody to like help light it into a fire. But then in that moment I did. And so I guess at that moment I was like, I guess I'm leaving Netflix, like, which people very rarely leave Netflix. And it was like, I guess I'm gonna do that. I just believe in it too much. And once I get my head around something, I just can't not do something. And so that was really kind of the moment.
Wow. So it's basically you're like, oh, hey, wait a minute. I've got this idea. And then you walked away with, okay, I got to put a business plan together.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Wow. They're like, come back in 3 months, actually present us this as a business.
And you're like, this could work.
Yeah. I got like 5 minutes into my business plan and I was like, this doesn't make sense. So I ended up just making a deck. And that ended up being our business plan. Like traditional business plans, like, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I don't think many people do some of that kind of traditional stuff anymore. It's like create a deck, present an idea, have a good financial backing within a spreadsheet and what the plan is, but have a really good, what could this thing be? Have a vision of what it is. And what ended up working with that, once I got to the pitch was I just presented a map. And I just showed where publishers are today. And I had a dot for each publisher. And it showed itself. There was nothing in the middle. And that became the most powerful piece to kind of get investment.
Have you written an article about that and talked about that? That would be a great LinkedIn artitle. And share your presentation and everything. So people get inspired.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny because that slide was originally in my appendix because it was just like, oh, it's an informational slide. Mm-hmm. But what you get when you've presented a couple times, and I had some early like trusted partners that I knew could give me some good feedback. And every single one of them was like, I didn't quite get it until I saw the map. And so then I just moved the map to the second slide in my deck, and that became that powerful piece. So yeah, I could at some point show like the evolution of kind of even pitch decks. Like I've evolved my deck probably at least 10,000 times at this point.
Right. That's awesome. I just think it would be some great LinkedIn content for sure. So let's see another question from over here. So are you where are you at right now where you expected to be at this time?
I don't know where
Crazy.
I don't know where I expected to be. You dream of what it could be. You have to have that, like, whoa, what if it was, what if it becomes that? It definitely hasn't done that. And I think it would be unrealistic to think that it actually would immediately. But, if I look back and put on a realistic, lens to things, I think we are where I would expect us to be. We have taken our lumps. We've had challenging times. We've had to make challenging decisions. We've had some successes. We've had some proof points. We hit all of our milestones we aimed to hit. And then we had huge challenges in the market. The investment market right now is awful. Q4 was the worst quarter for investments in 5 years. Ever since, really the kind of pandemic level investment like spiked in such a huge way. So we're going back to like 2019 levels of investment, or even lower than that in some ways. And I also looked at, for companies that came out in 2023, only 2% have been able to get investment past their initial round. And so we faced those challenges too. Like, people just aren't investing. People, especially for a business like ours is a little bit a tough investment, because traditional publishing, if you think about what a venture capital firm or larger investors do, they're doing in some ways a similar thing to what we're doing, where they're investing in something and you spread your risk across a number of different things. And so for them, we're like a fund of funds. Like, we're an investment that then takes the money and invests it. And even though that's not actually what we're doing, a lot of venture firms see us as that. So we're a tough investment in general. So not only is it hard to market, it's exceptionally hard to get investment as a publisher. And so we saw those tough points, but we overcame. We scrapped, we clawed, we got to certain points, and I think it's all made us better, because we've had to really evaluate our business. And to the point of the announcement next week, we saw opportunities. And the only way you see opportunities is if you put yourself out there, you're in market, you go through the challenging times, and you look and see the opportunity in other areas. And that's exactly what has happened in our case. And that's why I have an extremely positive outlook moving forward, even though, in some ways we barely made it. We barely cut through, but I always knew that we would problem solve in the moment. And I'm fortunate to have such an incredible team around me that has, scratched and clawed with me along the way. And so, yeah, I think we're about where I'd expect, not necessarily where you hope, but you hope one of the games takes off and suddenly you're able to do whatever the heck you want. But I think in the scheme of things, it's better, because our intent in coming to market was to create positive change by investing in underserved places around the world, like the Midwest. And now I think by going through the tough times, we see where there's really unique opportunities to actually create larger change in the industry by changing some of the models, or creating alternatives to the models. Like, the existing models are going to stay. Like, they're too lucrative not to, but that doesn't mean that other things can't exist as well. And I think we're at the point in the industry where we need some of those alternatives.
That's awesome. And it's also helping developers succeed that might not have a chance.
Yep.
All right, that's awesome. All right, we've got our first question here from Derek Fields. Some of the best outcomes can form out of one's network, and your story for how Midwest Games formed is inspiring. As you look to the future of game publishing in the Midwest, what new connections do you hope to form? And shout out to MDev, by the way.
Yes, MDev. Yeah, I mean, for MDev, by the way, if you're not familiar, is the largest game industry focused event in the Midwest. It's something that I co-chair because I'm the president of the Wisconsin Games Alliance. Can you repeat the final piece of the question again?
Sure. It was as you look to the future of game publishing in the Midwest, what new connections do you hope to form?
So I see everything as an ecosystem. I'm a bit of a systems thinker. A lot of that comes from the fact that I have ADHD, and I've had to systemize so much of my life and I didn't realize. I just found out actually a couple of years ago. But it's an ecosystem, and what I hope for in the Midwest is that we start connecting the dots between emerging ecosystems, because what I see is not what happened in like Austin, Texas. As much as we can compare it to Austin and the growth as a kind of an alternative to San Francisco, LA, Seattle, because it was lower cost, because they had a lot of tech existing, a lot of art, a lot of things came together that fit really well in the games industry. How I think it's going to happen in the Midwest is that we're going to connect the dots between a lot of mid-sized cities that have emerging growth. So Madison being one example, but there's also Ann Arbor, Cincinnati, Columbus, Indianapolis, and then you have Chicago, the third largest city in the country, the centerpiece of games in the Midwest for a long time, when Midway was there until 2009. And you connect that in Minneapolis, and there's other cities as well, St. Louis. If we can connect the dots and get folks to collaborate across these cities together, and being, relatively close to one another, but the necessity not being that we have to have one Austin, Texas. I think the Austin, Texas of the future is that we are going to be able to network and connect these dots and work together to elevate the entire Midwest. It doesn't have to just be one place. And so that can happen in many different ways. One way I see it happening is, if we are able to get a tax incentive in Wisconsin, for example, and we're actively working through it. We're trying to get it this year, 30% tax incentive. If we get that puts pressure on other states around to do something similar, to get competitive, to kind of grow the industry that in those places. And then that attracts people, especially from California, which is 50% of the industry in the US. If we can start attracting people to these places and they know that there's a network, that even if they go to Indianapolis and that job doesn't work out, that there's a network all the way around, we're going to create stability in the Midwest and people working together, and people, working at events like MDev and creating more events. There should be a big event in Chicago, and there isn't. There's a couple of smaller events, but there should be a giant one. And I just think there's so much opportunity if we can work together as a region, not look at it as competitive. Like, if Madison wins, I lose. That's not true. If Madison wins, the Midwest wins. If Columbus wins, the Midwest wins. And so if we can get that collaboration together and then bring in people that are also underserved, there's an amazing studio in New York, in Troy, New York, that came to MDev as well, Wolfjaw Studios, that also is a little bit outside of the bubbles that are in the US. And we should collaborate with folks like that. Folks in the South is largely underserved as well. And it creates a more successful middle of the country in this industry and diversifies kind of the industry, which I think is going to make it better. It's going to create more games that serve more people from different backgrounds. And I think that's all positive.
Yeah. So I'm in Florida, but I'm in Northwest Florida. So that is, to get to Orlando, it's 7 hours away. And there's stuff that happens over there and even further south, but further south is like 10, 12 hours away. I can drive through 4 states going west, in the amount of time I can get to drive to Orlando. But there's not that much here. I've reached out to some local developers and whatnot. And there's a couple of people that I met, but there's not really any kind of hub where I am at. No, Alabama, Georgia, Northwest Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, so that's I think that's awesome. All right, so tell us about your typical day as a CEO, Midwest Games.
Well, I wake up with anxiety, and to go through my emails, go through what usually something from our lawyers, something from partners, something from some developers, but immediately jump into just a ton of emails that pile up in my inbox. Try to get through that. Usually have a number of different meetings. We have different sync meetings, whether it be one-on-ones with the executive team, or team meetings, or leadership meetings, or meetings with my board or my advisory board. Legal connections on the many different things that are going on. It's incredible how many different avenues. And then investors are calling me. Like, the thing about investors is you're always on their schedule. Like, they're never on your schedule. It's not like you have, this is the time that is for investors. Like, no, it's when they call, when they email, you react. So
okay.
Yeah. What do you need? How can I help? What do you want to know? Part of one strategy that I've had that I think is useful for anyone trying to do a startup, that has helped with that, is I send monthly updates, and there's some work obviously associated with that. And some months there's more to talk about than other months. But what that does is it makes sure our current investors and prospective investors all know what's going on. I'm not talking to at this point, hundreds of people I've talked to previously, individually every month. I'm able to update them. And then those that have something that they want to talk about can come to me at that point, but it helps to kind of set out an expected time frame for when I'm going to hear from them, compared to it being random. When if you don't update somebody over a couple months, you're just going to start to get random pings because they're going to be curious, what's going on with my money that I invested.
Yeah.
And so that is one way that I've been able to kind of do that. But a lot of my job is really, what does my team need that helps them move forward? What are the things I need to set from a strategic layer that allows them the clarity to know, what direction are we going? And then, culturally, like, what are the things I can do that sets a standard for what I expect from how we work together and how we interact together. And so that's a lot of what my job is just enabling my team to do the best work they do by a lot of times getting out of their way, letting, not micromanaging, but diving in when something needs feedback, or if something I don't think is going the direction that I think we need to be going as a company. That's really what so much of my work is. And then managing all of the factors around our company so that my team doesn't get affected by it, that I can handle those things and allow them to not get distracted by all the outside noise that exists.
Right. All right. So I got a couple questions. The first one, so basically you have like an investor newsletter that you send out once a month, right? Yes. All right. So for people that, are in the games industry and curious about like how I'm working with an investor, like what are they, like what kind of information do you send them?
Yeah.
Money stuff,
Money stuff, you always have to be cautious because, it's a lot of it's contextual. You could send some kind of, chart on money, but if you don't behind, or the direction behind, or you're not in the weeds of understanding strategy of what's going on with the company, it could be perceived positively, it could be perceived negatively. So a lot of it is, how are they going to receive the information that you're going to be serving to them, and understanding what they all need, what they're looking for. So a lot of how we structure it is on a monthly basis, we do just a 1-page update. And then on a quarterly basis, we do what tends to be a 4 or 5-page update. And the pieces of information we put in typically are a quick note from me to kind of explain what has happened on a quarterly basis. During the monthly ones, each of my leadership team does that note so that investors can get to know the team, get their perspective, get their ends of things, whether it be the marketing or production or other areas, so that they always know what's happening. And I give kind of a high level update of what's happening, kind of some of our wins, some of our challenges or opportunities ahead of us. And then in the longer ones, we'll go in more depth of, what is the status of the games? Where are they tracking to right now? What are the dates on them? What are the marketing beats that we went through? What was from some of those? And then what are some of our goals moving forward, and kind of laying that out. And then I try to put in, a bit of industry education, what's happening in the industry, because a lot of investors, especially if they're not, there's VCs that invest just in games, but there's so many of investors have no idea what's happening in the games industry, aren't familiar with it, might be taking a bet on me individually, or might be taking a bet on the Midwest and trying to support a new industry in the Midwest or in Wisconsin. And so they might not know some of these things happening. So I try to add that educational layer that might be like oh yeah, like no duh for somebody that's in the industry because they see it all the time, but actually is not obvious for somebody not in the industry. So I try to make it educational as well. Who knows like how much they read of everything, but I put it out there anyways. And more often than not, I'll get comments from folks of like, oh yeah, like I enjoy the newsletters. I always feel like I'm up to date on everything. And you try to just position it towards, what is gonna inform folks the most. And I try to also just be blunt around some of the challenges too, as much as possible. Again, it's hard to without the full context, so you have to frame it in the right way. And then if someone asks about it, like I just am, very transparent. I think we try to be very transparent with everything that we do. We don't have anything to hide. We're going to have our failures. We're going to have our successes. Our failures we should be talking about. We should be evaluating. We should be looking at ways to improve. And I don't think you have to be afraid of that. Investors know that you're going to fail at times. In fact, they know that most of the things they invest in are probably going to fail. So you shouldn't be afraid of the fact that at times you're going to do something that doesn't work.
Yeah, and I bet investors have gotten things. We're doing good, and bam, the company's under. Like you should have told me. I could have helped.
Yep.
So everyone in chat and in Discord, if you want to go ahead and post, we got some questions already, which is awesome. If you want to post some more questions for Ben, just drop them into Discord. We'll put them in here, or drop them into the chat. Or if you're in Discord, you can come into the chat on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, and drop them in chat. Or now I'm just making it way more difficult than possible. Okay, so here's our first question from James Coote for Game Studios. How do you go about finding that core identity or thing that defines the studio?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be authentic to, what that studio represents, what they're trying to build, what they're trying to be. So many different studios do it in so many different ways. Some of it is like, how do you stand out? If you can create a defined brand of sorts that is, is what your studio represents, and you can get an audience that attracts to that immediately gets people to attract to the games that you work on. As I look at even us as a publisher, by going the route as labeling ourselves as Midwest Games, rather than like some random name that I would come up with, Great Games Studios or something like that, we immediately have an audience that is attracted to that. And so knowing who you are, what your brand is, what you represent, what kinds of games you make. You look at a company like Hooded Horse. They have done incredibly well, and they're like, we're strategy and tactics, and this is our model. And they're just transparent with it. So I think the biggest thing is knowing who you are, being authentic with it, and then being transparent around what that is. And that will help attract a certain initial audience into what you're building. But it's always going to come down to the game and what you actually put out there, because people usually don't know companies or brands until some game takes off in a huge way. And then they know what the game dev studio is. And then maybe they know what the publisher point as well. But it's always front and center is the game that you're putting out, and is it attractive to a certain audience.
I do believe that Midwest Games is a brilliant name for that, because immediately what happens when I first heard that, and when I still hear it, is I just see, like, my brain zooms on a map of the US and then a pin goes dink, and it's like, that's Midwest Games. That's what it is. It's games in the Midwest.
It's all relative, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because for you it is that, but I had somebody message me from Germany, and they go, Midwest Germany? I said, sure. Like, it's all relative. In the Midwest, in the US, we know we generally know what the Midwest is. Actually, even people in the Midwest don't agree what is Midwest or not, especially since the Midwest is really, if you look at a map of the US, it's kind of like eastish, and like obviously the northern part of so like the whole Midwest idea is all relative to the fact that we had 13 colonies, and when people were moving west, that was kind of a midpoint relative to the East Coast,
right?
Which is always funny. So it's funny how naming like that can make such a difference, but it immediately attracts people. Everyone, what I've kind of found, even before this, was everyone has some connection to the Midwest. Like everyone, whether it be a family member, whether it be that they're randomly a Packers fan, because Packers were so successful during the 90s that attached a lot of fans as they were kind of growing into the fandom of football. Whether it just, they're from there, they have some story about the Midwest. And for some reason, that region has this kind of affinity that is really unique. And the people there are just very nice. And you want a beer, you want cheese curds, you want it's just a very different than many places in the US. And so it fit kind of who we are authentically, but also who we want to represent and how we want to do work. It's like fair deal, take advantage. We're trying to run a business, we're trying to be successful, but we're not trying to take advantage of somebody. We're trying to provide fair deals that work on both ends of things.
That's awesome. Or the connection could be that they do a very good Wisconsin accent.
Yeah. Up there in the north.
Don't you know?
Yeah, don't you know? You betcha. Yeah.
Here's another one from James on YouTube, where Midwest Games found that in terms of location, geography, what might be some other things aside from the obvious game genres?
Where are Midwest Games found?
I'm trying to process that too.
Yeah. Well, so understanding a piece of it correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a piece of Midwest and being located in the Midwest is related to what I see as scarcity. I've talked about this a few times before, but I'm a big fan of the book Dune, and the whole series, and ultimately the kind of story of Dune is that scarcity creates opportunity to really be good at certain things, and the Fremen ultimately become this extremely powerful group of millions of incredible warriors that can survive in the most hostile environment. And if I think about the game scene, if you're a developer in California, it's not that it's not tough. It is. It's just you have more resources. You have more direct connections in the area. You have just a bigger network there. In the Midwest, in order to survive, you have to be very good at what you do. You have to be efficient. and you have to take advantage of every opportunity you get, because you might not get another opportunity. And it just has created incredible developers, along with the fact that the Midwest has an incredible education ecosystem, especially around STEM. A lot of engineers come from the region. Some of the top public universities in the world are in the region, and they've relatively made college somewhat affordable, especially compared to other places in the U.S. And it allows for just a really strong base. Now, the problem has been brain drain. Those people end up being on the West Coast, which is why it's so funny. The companies I've worked for, it seems like half the people I worked with were from the Midwest, yet living in California. And so I think there is a unique opportunity, especially with people moving back and working remote, to build off of people that have a lot of the training, have a lot of the experience, and then instead of the pipeline leaving, encouraging the pipeline to be able to stay, because there's a really strong talent pipeline that California and Washington and Texas love to pull from. And if we can get more businesses that are successful in the Midwest, it will allow pipelines into those businesses that will help create them into the largest companies. So often those big companies have moved. Bungie was founded in Chicago. Dungeons and Dragons was created in Wisconsin. Those companies have all then moved to the West Coast, but they were all founded and started in the Midwest. And part of the reason they had to move back then was there was more physical reasons why. There was no remote. You needed to be around the partners that were going to allow you to do business best, but that doesn't exist anymore. So maybe that answered the question, maybe not, but that is some insight into why I think the Midwest is a unique opportunity.
Now all I can hear is a D&D session with a Wisconsin accent.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, but that's where it started. I mean, so Gen Con, a lot of people don't realize why they call it Gen Con, but Gen Con is because it's the Dungeons and Dragons created in Lake Geneva. So the Gen is from Gen, and that's why it's called Gen Con. Now it's in Indianapolis, but that's all because it started in Lake Geneva, and then it became Gen Con. But even like Stranger Things hints at the Midwest connection. Stranger Things is based in obviously fictional Hawkins, Indiana. But even when they go up to camp, to science camp, it's in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And the Dungeons and Dragons connection being very Midwest during that era, like it was big in the Midwest because that's where it was created and that's where it really took hold. But yeah, it was. The Wizards were, doing, during campaigns, rather than what you think maybe a British wizard would be.
That's funny. All right. So we got a couple of questions that relate to each other. I want to ask this one first. This is from Victoria Spadin on Discord. Any advice on getting funding or visibility for a small studio working on its first game?
Getting funding for a first-time studio is
funding or visibility.
Yeah. So the funding part's really tough, like really tough. Visibility part, find your niche, find your audience on places like Reddit, Discord. Look in communities that are similar. Depends on what you're creating. There's different audiences in different places, so find where that is. It could be TikTok, it could be Facebook, like it could be many places from a social perspective. But I think the best way to stand out is to be loud about who you are and what you're doing. Even when we announced the company, like before I even had a name for it, part of the reason we got a lot of promotion right away is because I was very loud about what I believed in and what we needed to do, and that captured people's attention. Even though I didn't have a name for it, I just said I want to support people in underserved places like the Midwest, and and I was leaving Netflix to do it. Now the Netflix piece definitely got attention, and so I think you just have to be loud about who you are and what you believe in and how you think what you're doing can make a difference. And a difference could mean more so like someone enjoying a certain type of game or a certain way. We've seen this with the folks that have come out loud about cozy games, and cozy's become such a huge genre and broad genre. But it started really with people just loving that style, that lifestyle. And a lot of companies have attached onto it. A lot of influencers have attached onto it. And they've just been like, that's what represents them. Every day they live that lifestyle. And it's become a lifestyle, like the cozy game lifestyle of things. So, as you're creating a studio, like think about what is it you're building, because it's not good enough just to create a studio and stand out. It used to be. There's so many studios. You have to have something that differentiates you or makes you resonate with a certain audience. And it could be something you've worked on in the past. We see it all the time. Like, a certain person that worked on a certain game, and now they're creating a studio and creating games like that, and then immediately having that audience attracted to that potential new studio and game that are coming out. You have to follow through and release something that hits the expectations of the audience, but at least you can get some visibility immediately if you have that.
So I wonder, I don't know how this relates, but I wonder if the cozy games that got popular last year also align with the massive amount of influencers that have moved out and bought little farms and then post videos about making sourdough bread.
I mean, it's probably part of it. There's a lot of that in Wisconsin. Let me tell you, I have a sourdough person in Green Bay.
Really?
Yeah, and sourdough cinnamon rolls might be the single best thing ever created.
Sourdough cinnamon rolls.
If you have never had a sourdough cinnamon roll, I had never until last year. Oh my God, amazing. But yes, I think there's a connection between that. I think, listen, gaming is life. Like it's the largest audience, and people want games that represent them. And they want to resonate with it. That's their community. That's their people, and it can be single player, it can be multiplayer, it can be whatever, but it represents so much of it. And we've always wanted that. And I think people doing like a representation of like what they want in game. Like so much of gaming is, we gamed because we couldn't actually do some of those things in real life. And now we kind of can in some ways, at least in certain genres, certain styles. I didn't see the sourdough comment, but
it was Pep's Ash, our amazing community manager. My husband is obsessed with making sourdough. He has all the fancy stuff to get his starters perfect and whatnot. He's got like a 300-year-old starter.
Oh, wow.
No, I don't know. I'm just making stuff up now, but
make some cinnamon rolls. That's what I'm going to tell you. If you learn one thing from today, have some sourdough.
Make cinnamon rolls. Forget all of the business insight. Just make some sourdough cinnamon rolls and call it good for the day. All right, we've got what do we got? We got about 10 minutes left, and we got some questions here still from Silver Lightning on YouTube. Any insights of your thoughts of how to pick a game for publishing? Obviously, business fit, but at what stage of a game do you feel comfortable being reached out at?
I mean, anytime you can get noticed by a publisher, try to. There's so much competition. You got to remember, there's like 200 to 300 publishers worldwide that do full service publishing. There's a lot that do like little pieces of it, or might act like they're a publisher, but like actual like full service publishing, it's about 200, 300. So we get hundreds to thousands of pitches. And anytime you can try to get someone's attention, awesome. Now, realistically, a lot of those publishers are only investing in later stage proven games, meaning you have already shown that there's a product market fit, and really what a publisher does best is it adds jet fuel to a fire. like if you've already been able to prove out that you have a fire, a publisher is really good about taking that to the next level. Publishers, or at least, I would say most publishers aren't great at taking something from absolutely nothing to something. They can try, and sometimes they succeed, but those statistically have a lower success percentage if you can prove that you have something. So what I recommend is, like, you need something playable that shows the vision of things. And there's a lot of ways to show the vision of what it is, but that you have that, you can show that there is a potential audience or an existing audience that you're already talking to that are excited. It could be because you posted some screenshots or a video on Twitter or TikTok, and a lot of people like resonate with that. That's one way to do it. Wish lists, all that kind of stuff. If you already set up a Steam page and have some of that, like any proof points that you have are really valuable. And you got to remember that the Steam algorithm is estimated. You need about 10,000 wish lists to get the algorithm to even ingest you into it. Mm-hmm. So think about that from a measurement standpoint, because if you already have that or above that, you're in a really good place, because the minute you start to add in publishing support, which is all the tactical layers of things, the strategic layers and the marketing layers that really help you stand out more. If you already have that core initially started, then it's going to be able to exponentially grow. Whereas if you don't have that, it's much harder to get to somewhere. And so I recommend having, a lot of those ingredients, as many as you can, but you never know. Like, there's still people that sign paper pitches. There are still games that are incredibly successful that never end up getting a publisher, even though they try to. I would say be careful with some of the articles and things you see on the internet saying, like, oh, look, this indie game that self-published had all the success. Remember that there's thousands of indie games that do the same formula that fail, and using them as a case study is ignoring the many games that struggled and did the exact same thing that they did. And so just be careful with that. Take everything with a grain of salt, but try to learn from each of the things and see what you can integrate into your own thing. Every game is different, and so you have to really treat it in a bespoke way. And that's the problem with frankly, some publishers, is they want to treat games all the same, uniform, like do the same thing for everything. You can't do that. You have to, but you still have to be efficient as a publisher across the different things, but you have to treat every single one as a different way of going to market.
Right. And there's quite a few just amazing success stories, and you want to look at that and be like, and read about it and learn it. But personally, I believe the most informative case studies or postmortems are games that have failed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because you learn more from failing than you do from succeeding, because there's a lot of people that have just been at the right place at the right time. Yep. This just happened and somebody had money, but without those things, it's all the other stuff that is the same as everything else. Yeah. All right.
Well, and part of that is, even like, just to quickly, like, part of it is the environment's changed dramatically. Even 3-4 years ago, there was dramatically less games coming to market than there are today. So if you take a lesson from somebody that started a couple of years ago, it's just so much different. If you look 10 years ago, like, the people, and that's the part of the challenge too, like, some of the successes that I was a part of, 10 plus years ago, it's not the same environment anymore.
Technology is advanced, society has changed. Yeah,
and the volume of titles that are going out in the market and competing for time, and people they only have so much time. And a great quote by Reed Hastings, a former CEO of Netflix, was, they were like, we're not competing with Disney Plus, like, with streaming wise, we're competing with Fortnite, because he understood that there's only so much time in the day that you have to put towards entertainment. As much as I wish I could just play games all day, you only have so much time. and you're being pulled in a million directions. And if you don't create something that attracts somebody immediately and makes them want to come into some new world, they just go back to what they're used to, especially after a long day. You go back to the tried and true. That's why so much of it is these walled garden games that ultimately keep people, because it's a comfort thing. But how do you stand out? And that is the key to trying to break through. And with so much being thrown at it, and some of it, you see some tactic of somebody, and then it's disingenuous, like it doesn't live up to it, then you lose trust. And then you might not trust something else. And so it just becomes a tough environment.
Yeah. So don't screw it up for everybody. Right?
Some people already did.
People screwing it up for everyone. Just ruin it for the whole community. All right. So we got 5 minutes left. We got 3 questions. So what do you think about a quick fire round?
Let's do it.
All right. So we got Jared Kidd. Jared Kidd's disheartened to hear most investors don't know the game industry, but have the money power to affect it. I mean, such is life. So the root question is, how much creative control do you have when finding publishers?
It all depends on your agreement. It always goes back to the agreement and who has final say on things and how much influence your publisher has. They're going to try to get as much influence as they can to control what they see as the desired outcome. Some publishers are good about keeping control with the developers.
Do you recommend indie developers getting an attorney, a game attorney?
Yes.
When they're dealing with publishers, instead of just taking.
We've forced developers that we've got done agreements with to get an attorney on their own end, because at the end of the day, like even with the best of intent, like we're trying to do positive deals, they need their own representation that will give a different perspective than what we're doing. So yes, an attorney is a must.
That's awesome. That's good. Jawad from YouTube, where do you see Midwest Games differentiate yourself aside from regional interest? As a partner to a studio, what would Midwest Games do best that others can't or wouldn't offer?
You will find out next week when we do a big announcement. So get ready for that. We will have that early in the week next week that will really differentiate, because to that point, if we use a traditional publishing model, are we that much different? No, but there's not many of us. So frankly, like that's part of what publishers can get away with right now, is you don't have to be different.
Yeah, there's literally only hundreds of publishers in the US right now.
Well, and one stat, which might be a little bit dated at this point, so I want to call that out ahead of time. But only 2% of games get publishing, and they make 75% of the revenue. So it's an unfair advantage to have a publisher, and so them asking for extreme revenue share terms is actually completely fair, because you have such a huge advantage. And that's where some of these dynamics need to change.
It's like you can either make this much money on your own, or you can make 100 times that.
Yeah.
But you have to give us X amount, whatever.
100% of zero is still zero.
100% of zero is still zero. Yeah. If you're not first, you're last, right?
Yeah.
All right. So this is from Michael from Discord. Our last question here from Actrio Studios. He also has a comment that says, by the way, we are from the Midwest of Germany. So that's funny. What new, more dev-friendly models to work with a publisher do you see for yourself in the industry to be working well in the future? Well, hopefully this announcement you have is going to be something that turns some tables.
Yeah. So
I don't know about tables, but
I mean, you look at so Hooded Horse has done some work to kind of change. From what I understand, they take a smaller percentage. They maybe don't invest as much, but I think it allows developers to have a larger percentage of it. I think about it from just a standpoint of stability, long term. And in order to create a more sustainable ecosystem, we need strong developers that have funding sources that are large and steady enough over time that they actually are the ones that start to invest their dollars into things, rather than always being at the mercy of publishers and investors and other things. If the only way this switches is if developers start to have more of their, like they get to choose their own path rather than being beholden to what others desire. So that's where the change needs to happen, is how do we create more sustainability for these developers? A lot of it will come off of previous success happening, but also that they need to get new models, because a lot of these folks have money and ultimately don't want to give up rev share or IP rights, but still have to in the current models of things.
Right. That's good stuff. Eduardo says, are you coming to Gamescom Latam in Brazil in March?
Probably not, because I have GDC. I know it's on the same time frame, but I'm going from DICE, GDC to London Games Festival. Fitting another one in will be tough. I really want to go to Gamescom Latam, and so we'll see. My sister-in-law is Brazilian, and so I need to make it down there at some point. I don't know if it'll be this year. Maybe next year.
Maybe next year. It's always a good trip anyways. I just posted your LinkedIn link and the Midwest Games link if anybody wants to check that or connect with you. I just realized I wasn't connected with you on LinkedIn either, so I sent a connection request. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to shout out? Keep a lookout for this note for this.
Well, so we announced 2 big games this fall. One called The Legend of Babu, so go wishlist that, and one called Tomb Water, go wishlist that. Both incredible indie titles. Legend of Babu is from a studio in Turkey. Tomb Water is from a studio in Columbus, Ohio. Like single person studio. So we need all the support we can get for these studios. They're absolutely incredible. Plus, That's if you awesome. Like a big fluffy dog, like Legend of Babu is for you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Ben, for coming on here today. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. This is also going to be a podcast here pretty soon, so keep an eye out for that, for the Indie Game Business Podcast. Make sure and join our Discord if you're not on there, discord.gg/Indie Game Business. And also sign up, go to indiegamebusiness.com, sign up for the newsletter. You get a list of investors and publishers when you sign up for that, which is amazing. Everybody have an amazing weekend. We're getting over the 8.5 inches of snow that we got in Florida, which was crazy. That's never been recorded, but it was fun. We made a snowman. Well, they made a snowman. I stayed inside and wore my slippers. So awesome. Everyone have a great weekend. Thank you.